This footage is going to change everything, Darius. It's the biggest scoop you'll ever get your hands on. When my close friend James told me he was sending a few encrypted files over to my office laptop for review, I really didn't think much of it at the time. James has always been a bit of a sensationalist, touting stories as being larger than they really are for the entire time I've known him. Of course, he has successfully managed to make sure our paper can grab a few exclusives before the other big names in the city, so I knew his intel wasn't always bad. I just simply didn't understand the significance of this until I got a different phone call, alerting me that our downtown office building was on fire. I was in the middle of dinner with my girlfriend, but she understood why I had to drop everything. Our entire business was depending on saving as many laptops and documents as I could from the blaze. I could see it from about a quarter block away. The fire had started somewhere near the 5th floor. It didn't occur to me at the time that was where James's cubicle was located. The fire department did their best to stop the inferno, but they refused to let me rush in to save our devices. All I could do was watch as they doused the flames and continue to make sure the area was roped off. It was an excruciatingly long 20 minutes, and I was on the phone about 3 times with my boss chewing me out that I didn't try to supersede the first responders and get into the burning building. Once they gave us the all clear to head inside, I covered my mouth and rushed up to the smoldering staircase to our offices, fully expecting to see the majority of it torched. I told myself I was ready for that inevitability, but seeing all of our offices and the file cabinets and camera equipment turn to char flooded me with anxiety and despair. After trying my best to avoid having an anxiety attack, I began to search through the wreckage for anything that survived. Picking apart the blackened rubble and watching as electronic devices crumbled in my hands was heartbreaking. But I did manage to salvage a few things here and there amid the rubble. I told the firefighters we wanted a full report about what caused the blaze, and went home late that evening feeling dejected and defeated about the experience as a whole. But I never would have imagined a few hours later I would also be adding fear and trepidation to that list. It had to be at least 2 in the morning when James pounded on my apartment door. I live in a very small complex just south of the river. Most of my coworkers have been there a few times, but never at this hour. I groggily asked what he wanted, but instead of responding, he barged into my apartment and laid down a few stacks of papers. "You went to the fire. Of course you did. Good. This will be easier to explain then. It's gone, Darius." I was still trying to wake up and asked him what he meant, to which he pointed to one of the stacks of paperwork and answered, "The video footage I snagged. The one I told you was gonna change the world. I was just at the office trying to see if there was anything to recover from the inferno. And it's simply gone." "You mean your laptop got burned? That's no shocker. The majority of the stuff on the floor did," I commented as I went to pour some coffee. His wild-eyed look told me that I needed to be fully awake to hear whatever he was about to tell me. "It was stolen. I'm sure of it. Most of what was in my cubicle I could recognize amid the rest of the debris, but I didn't see anything that looked like my laptop, so I brought the paper copies here to give you a look. It's not the same, but it could help us find another version of the evidence, maybe." "James, you're not making much sense. Are you saying the fire was intentional and the only reason these arsonists would risk jail time was to destroy your stuff, not the rest of it? What story could you possibly have that would be worth that much?" I said as I went over the first stack and started to sort through the papers he'd brought. A lot of it was charts and biological scans, data from clinics that had been redacted. A few sheets down, I noticed strange geometric designs and patterns, the kind of thing you might associate with the occult. "What exactly is all this?" "Remember how I told you I had a contact in Europe a few months ago? Someone that was a whistleblower?" he said, pointing to the next part of the document that was written in what looked like Latin. "Forgive me, but can you just get to the point and tell me what this supposed conspiracy is all about?" James took the second stack and showed me a transcript with a seal that I immediately recognized. "My defector was from the Vatican, worked in the archives actually," he told me. "A deacon that defected? Well, I guess that's a headline." I started to read through the transcript, a bit perplexed by what the document was claiming. The Vatican representative had some crazy out there ideas, especially about angels and demons. I stopped reading when the interviewer claimed that these supernatural beings walked among us. "Please tell me that you didn't believe this pile of horseshit," I said, giving him a dry look. Immediately, James went on the offensive. "This is exactly why I needed the video files. They said they would send them discreetly, but the fire proved otherwise. Don't you see? The attack on our office proves that I was onto something here," James insisted. I finally got a chance to look at the clock. It was nearly 3 a.m. in the morning. My patience hit its limit. "Let's talk about this tomorrow, huh? I need sleep, and so do you. We can present your findings to the boss when we have lunch." James shuffled the papers together, giving me an ugly look. "You think this is nonsense? You wouldn't be saying that if you saw what I saw. The found footage was raw proof of this cover-up," he growled as he gathered what he brought. A few of the stray papers fell to the floor as he hurried out of my apartment. "I wanted you to see this first, so you would be on my side. But I can see now coming here was a mistake. You're no different than the rest," he snarled as he slammed my door back. I leaned over and picked up the papers he'd brought. One included a few names for a clinical trial in Boston. Another was a sigil that reminded me of the Knights Templar, and the third looked like it was a page ripped from the Da Vinci Code. I couldn't help but chuckle at the similarities to his Wild Goose Chase and that famous book. Then I crumpled them all together and tossed them into my trash dispenser. I went to bed angry and disappointed in James, but also fearful because of what he claimed about the arson. These were other conspiracy nuts willing to hurt us because of this footage. And if it's one group of people I knew not to piss off, it was the crazy religious ones. I got up to make sure my door was locked, and then somehow found a way to get sleep. For reasons I couldn't explain yet, my dreams were troubled and filled with strange imagery of demonic spirits and angels chanting in the name of God. Neither sight was pleasant to behold, but the angelic host actually frightened me more. I got perhaps an hour and a half sleep before I was rudely awakened again, this time by the police. 2 junior detectives were at my doorstep, alerting me to the fact that James had been found dead. "What?" My mouth felt dry the moment they gave me the news, and my mind flashed back to the strange conspiracies he had tried to convince me of. "It's looking like it was a suicide. In his note, he referenced you, hence why we are here," the first officer explained. "What did it say?" I asked, but the officers told me they weren't at liberty to say. They told me that nothing had been found near his body, which troubled me even more, and then added there was still going to be an investigation because the circumstances were suspicious. "What do you mean?" I asked. "There were a few marks on his back that didn't look like they were self-inflicted, so we can't help but to wonder if perhaps someone forced him to write the note before also making sure he didn't survive the night," the second officer explained. I asked them to keep me in the loop about anything they find, and the 2 of them bid me a good night, leaving me alone to the morbid thought that James's conspiracy had likely been the reason for his death. I didn't believe him to be a real person, and the fact the police mentioned that nothing was found near him troubled me. He had gone through the trouble of trying to collect all of his papers before he left here, and yet not a scrap of evidence existed. Someone was trying to make sure that the whispers of this bizarre angelic tale he spun to me would never see the light of day. I reached into my trash and plucked out the papers that had been discarded in his haste. If I was going to find out the truth, I realized I would need to do my own research into this mystery. I didn't even attempt to sleep again, for fear that whoever had attacked and murdered James might find me next. Instead, I spent the last dreary hours before daylight trying to find anything I could on the clinical trials near Boston. I figured it was the best lead from the papers James had given me, but it still proved difficult to discover anything related to the names. Eventually, I did stumble across a few names that seemed to connect to a nursing home just past the river. So, without much else to go on, I drove there at first light with coffee in my hand. All the while, I had the image of James in my head, strangled from a belt dangling above his head. While the police didn't tell me precisely how he died, the image I had conjured up felt accurate. and I had a premonition that someone bearing the tattoo of the sigil from the other page was the one responsible. Now, it was simply a matter of bringing them to justice. The nursing home actually proved to be not only for the elderly, but also developmentally disabled adults, and I soon discovered that the 3 individuals I came searching for fit this category. All of them were in their late 20s or early 30s, all men, and all of them looked like they had been brutally tortured at one time or another. Most of their mental capacity seemed gone because, as I tried to communicate, all I found was the 3 were in a vegetative state. "Excuse me, but are you family?" a nurse asked as I tried to get one of them to respond to my prompts. "I'm sorry, no, I came here as part of an insurance case," I said, thinking fast on my feet. I knew that these people value privacy, and one wrong thing could get me thrown out. "Insurance? We were told that was resolved last year," she said skeptically. "It's a review. Can you tell me what happened to this client?" I asked, pointing to the comatose woman. "Look, just because you have huge money from friends in the Holy City doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. You've hurt these people enough," the nurse said, growing louder and more irate. "Holy City? Do you mean the Vatican?" I asked as I recalled the sigil. Now I knew where I had seen it before, on a crest in an old movie connected to that place. James had claimed his source came from there as well. "Do you have any records of when they were first brought here?" I asked, but the nurse had apparently already figured out I didn't belong and started to walk to find her supervisor. It was time for me to disappear. I went the opposite direction, searching for the record department and making sure they didn't see which way I went. When I did find the right room, I started to pour through the files, trying to find the names that were connected to the trials. When I did find them, I immediately started to see connections written in their first data here at the home. For one thing, all of them were registered as being originally from Europe. No actual birth data or anything related to their time before coming to America. Almost as if they didn't exist at all or had been created the moment they came here. Where had they been before that? Why had the Vatican sent them here? I also noticed that all of them shared a similar tattoo to their right ankle. It reminded me of the sigil I now recognized as being connected to the Holy City. Along with that tattoo, each client had scars on their back, both the left and the right all the way down. The scars reminded me of what you might see if you plucked the wings of a bird. As much as I didn't want to even fathom the possibility of James being correct about this strange conspiracy, it was almost sounding plausible. I decided to try one last thing before leaving the home, returning to the comatose woman that I had been speaking with earlier. I showed her the sigil, asking if she had ever seen it before, but I didn't anticipate her visceral reaction to my inquiry. She actually started to shake and act like she was having a seizure and moan. Then, she startled me and grabbed at my arms, her nails digging into my flesh as she garbled incoherent words. She spat and foamed against my face, pinning me to the floor. I found myself shocked that this elderly woman even had such strength. I pushed her away, scrambling to stand and protect myself as she kept trying to attack me. It was as if she possessed superhuman strength. Behind me, a few orderlies pushed me aside and sedated her as a new nurse walked in, giving me a judgmental look. "You're from the insurance, you said?" he asked as I was escorted to their office. "I'm guessing that story isn't sticking," I realized as soon as I saw 2 police officers. Everyone was waiting for me to give an answer that could get me out of this mess. Instead, right before they let me into the office, I bolted into the opposite direction. Not my best reaction. I could hear them frantically trying to find me. I hid in a linen closet and listened for the noises to die down. Then I snuck out toward the eastern wing and to my car. I was just about to leave the place entirely when the nurse from earlier spotted me. I was certain she was about to squeal again, but instead, she passed me a small copper key. "Take this to the storage center over in Midtown, the big one, box 306. That's where you will find the remaining footage. Go now, before they find out you were here," she insisted. I heard the shouting coming from another part of the wing and wasted no time to appreciate her gift, racing to my car and then getting away from the building before more enforcement was called. As I got on the highway, I finally found myself able to calm down. But everything was spinning out of control inside my head. It was clear to me now that the people at the home had been experimented on somehow. Their superhuman abilities were not explainable any other way. Now I needed to get to the heart of the matter, I thought as I glanced at the key I had been given. The nurse had mentioned tapes, so I automatically connected it to the footage that James had died for. Apparently, there were more? I wasted no time making it to the storage center to find out, telling them which box I was searching and opening it without a second thought. Inside, I found only 2 dusty old VHS tapes, both marked with Hebrew letters. And right below them, someone had hastily scrawled the translation. It was all the same word. Penuel. I took them and left before anyone was the wiser. On my drive back to my apartment, I researched where to buy a VCR player and the meaning behind the Hebrew word. Penuel was said to be the spot where the Bible character Jacob wrestled with an angel all night. A verse said it was called the face of God, and some sources said that you could still go to the spot in the modern day and see a glimpse of the supernatural. I didn't believe that nonsense, but I found it interesting these tapes were connected again to James's claim of angelic experiments. The Vatican was hiding something, and I was intent to find out what. It took me a few hours to find the right pawn shop that sold the VCR, but I sped back to my apartment right after. I felt certain that the forces which had already taken out James were watching me, so I immediately started to watch the tapes. I will do my best to record what I saw, because I dare not repeat the experience. The first video started out quite boring. I wasn't sure what I was looking at because most of the people were speaking Spanish and Arabic with only minimal English from the cameraman. I took notes because the video was so scratchy. I knew it would likely be impossible to reproduce. It was clear whoever had created it wasn't intending it to be used for anything besides revealing the secrets that the Holy City had covered up. The cameraman was also extremely nervous because it was often difficult for him to keep his filming steady. And what I could see, even without the language, I understood was terrifying. The man had discreetly placed himself with a camera inside one of the patient wards from the hospital I had visited, allowing him to observe visitors coming by and checking the comatose woman. They would examine the scars on her back and try to get her to vomit, but I couldn't tell you why. The cameraman made a note that the scars showed no signs of healing, and that this was a good thing. As long as she does not sprout, she will remain safe, he explained in a low tone. The next few images provided me with a detailed look of the secluded room which the man was hiding in. Apparently, it was right next to the room where I had attempted to speak to the woman myself. And the mirror that was facing her was in fact a false one, allowing the cameraman easy access to anything within. I will stay here as long as necessary, he told whoever he intended this video for, and then placed the camera down and lay on the cold stone floor. I became alarmed when sounds of wails filled the video and saw the camera had caught the woman leaning back on her bed and screaming toward the ceiling. She would rear her head back, then scratch at her back as best as she could and keep shrieking for help. But none of the nurses came to her. The final part was the worst of all. It showed her trembling on the floor as dim light seeped through a glass window above. Her body was bare, and 2 doctors watched in awe as she underwent a transformation. The cameraman and I both found ourselves holding back a gasp as the woman grew white wings from her back. They spread almost as wide as the room. The doctors shouted at each other in excitement and sedated their newly formed creature, dragging her out of the room. The second video looked like it was filmed on a ship. The cameraman had somehow stowed aboard the vessel and kicked open a door to reveal what looked like dozens of cages, all of which had more strange, mutated people inside. All of them were weeping and gnawing at themselves, unable to stop the angelic transformation that was happening to their body. The man was talking in a low whisper, explaining that the ship was headed for the Vatican's secret lab somewhere in the sewers of that holy city. There, they will try to unlock the secrets to heaven again, and the ones that don't belong will be cast out. His video showed that the experiments seemed more successful on men. and he speculated this was connected to the biblical references to masculinity and angels. He also mentioned a man who was purchasing these people from stateside hospitals and selling them. Sinners, forgotten people that no one cares to look for. They are trying to make gods. The footage ended as he told the unseen audience he would send more when he arrived at the Vatican, and it was apparent that James was the recipient. As I finished them, I came to grips with the awfulness of these experiments and what they revealed. The people in charge of representing God were making monsters. I took them and tossed them into the dumpster, tearing out as much of the tape as I could. No one would ever see these horrors. I couldn't help but feel guilt creep into my soul. My friend had died for this, and so many would keep being tortured and experimented on because of my silence. But I am but one man, against a force that is creating God on Earth. Hiding was not a brave move. It is the only way for my survival.